Gildan Media, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Myth of Capitalism, Monopolies and the Death of Competition, by Jonathan Tepper with Denise Hearn, narrated by Pamela Almand. Publisher's note: this audiobook has bonus material. Please contact whomever you purchase this audiobook from to request the material. The bonus material includes charts and graphs. Introduction. On April 9, 2017, police officers from Chicago's O'Hare Airport removed Dr. David Dow from United Express Flight 3411. The flight was overbooked, but he refused to give up his seat. He had patients to treat the next day. Fellow passengers recorded a video of him being dragged off the plane. You could hear gasps of disbelief from fellow passengers. "Oh my God! No, this is wrong. Look at what you did to him." No one could believe what they were seeing. In the video, he could be seen bleeding from the mouth as police dragged him down the aisle. The video quickly went viral. United's CEO, however, did not apologize and instead blamed the passenger for being belligerent. Eventually, the outrage was so great that the CEO apologized and the airline reached an undisclosed settlement with Dr. Dow. Dr. Dow's lawyer, Thomas Demetrio, told journalists that Dr. Dow left Vietnam in 1975 when Saigon fell, and he was on a boat, and he said he was terrified. He said that being dragged down the aisle was more horrifying and harrowing than what he experienced when leaving Vietnam. Years ago, such a public relations disaster would have caused United's stock to stumble, but it quickly recovered. Financial analysts agreed that it would have no effect on the airline. For all of 2016, the company reported full-year net income of $2.3 billion. The results were so good that in 2016, United's board approved a stock buyback of $2 billion, which is the financial equivalent of spraying yourself with champagne. Research analysts dismissed the incident, saying consumers might not have much choice but to fly UAL due to airline consolidation, which has reduced competition over most routes. Online news sites helpfully explained to readers what had happened with headlines like, "Airlines can treat you like garbage because they are an oligopoly." Once investors started focusing on United's dominant market position, the stock price, in fact, went up. The analysts were right. The American skies have gone from an open market with many competing airlines to a cozy oligopoly with 4 major airlines. To say that there are 4 major airlines overstates the true level of competition. Most U.S. airlines dominate a local hub, unironically known as fortress hubs, where they face little competition and have a near monopoly. They have the landing slots, and they are willing to engage in predatory pricing to keep out any new entrants. At 40 of the 100 largest U.S. airports, a single airline controls a majority of the market. United, for example, dominates many of the country's largest airports. In Houston, United has around a 60% market share. In Newark, 51%. In Washington Dulles, 43%. In San Francisco, 38%. And in Chicago, 31%. This situation is even more skewed for other airlines. For example, Delta has an 80% market share in Atlanta and 77% in Philadelphia, while in Dallas-Fort Worth it has 77%. For many routes, you simply have no choice. The episode became a metaphor for American capitalism in the 21st century. A highly profitable company had bloodied a consumer, and it didn't matter because consumers have no choice. When consumers see a man bloodied by a big company or see a suffering patient gouged by a hospital, they get the sense that something is profoundly wrong with companies. All around the world, people have an overwhelming sense that something is broken. This is leading to record levels of populism in the United States and Europe, resurgent intolerance, and a desire to upend the existing order. The left and right cannot agree on what is wrong, but they both know that something is rotten. Capitalism has been the greatest system in history to lift people out of poverty and create wealth. But the capitalism we see today in the United States is a far cry from competitive markets. What we have today is a grotesque, deformed version of capitalism. Economists such as Joseph Stiglitz have referred to it as ersatz capitalism, where the distorted representation we see is as far away from the real thing as Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean are from real pirates. If what we have is a fake version of capitalism, what does the real thing look like? What should we have? According to the dictionary, the idealized state of capitalism is an economic system based on the private ownership of the means of production, distribution, and exchange, characterized by the freedom of capitalists to operate or manage their property for profit in competitive conditions. Parts of this definition have universal appeal today. Today, for example, we take private property for granted in the world. Communism defined itself in opposition to private property. Karl Marx wrote in The Communist Manifesto, "The theory of communists may be summed up in the single sentence, abolition of private property." After the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, communism collapsed and was widely discredited as a miserable failure. The battle for private property had been won. The harder part of the definition follows. Capitalism is characterized by the freedom of capitalists to operate or manage their property for profit in competitive conditions. The battle for competition is being lost. Industries are becoming highly concentrated in the hands of very few players with little real competition. Capitalism without competition is not capitalism. Competition matters because it prevents unjust inequality, rather than the transfer of wealth from consumer or supplier to the monopolist. If there is no competition, consumers and workers have less freedom to choose. Competition creates clear price signals in markets, driving supply and demand. It promotes efficiency. Competition creates more choices, more innovation, economic development and growth, and a stronger democracy by dispersing economic power. It promotes individual initiative and freedom. Competition is the essence of capitalism, yet it is dying. Competition is the basis for evolution. An absence of competition means an absence of evolution, a failure to adapt to new conditions. It threatens our survival. There are fewer winners and many losers when there is less competition. Rising market power by dominant firms has created less competition, lower investment in the real economy, lower productivity, less economic dynamism with fewer startups, higher prices for dominant firms, lower wages, and more wealth inequality. The evidence from economic studies is pouring in like a flood. Competition remains an ideal that is receding further from our reach. Don't take our word for it, though. According to the New York Times, markets work best when there is healthy competition among businesses. In too many industries, that competition just doesn't exist anymore. The Economist warns that America needs a heavy dose of competition. If you believe in competitive free markets, you should be very concerned. If you believe in fair play and hate cronyism, you should be worried. With fake capitalism, CEOs cozy up to regulators to get the kind of rules they want and donate to get the laws they desire. Larger companies get larger, while the small disappear, and the consumer and worker are left with no choice. Freedom is essential to capitalism. It is not surprising, then, that Milton Friedman picked Free to Choose as the title of his extremely popular PBS series on capitalism, and Capitalism and Freedom was the title of his book that sold over 1.5 million copies. He argued that economic freedom was a necessary condition for political freedom. Free to Choose sounds great. It's a bold statement and a really catchy title. Yet Americans are not free to choose. In industry after industry, they can only purchase from local monopolies or oligopolies that can tacitly collude. The United States now has many industries with only 3 or 4 competitors controlling entire markets. Since the early 1980s, market concentration has increased severely. As we'll document in this book, 2 corporations control 90% of the beer Americans drink. 4 airlines completely dominate airline traffic, often enjoying local monopolies or duopolies in their regional hubs. 5 banks control about half of the nation's banking assets. Many states have health insurance markets where the top 2 insurers have an 80 to 90% market share. For example, in Alabama, one company, Blue Cross Blue Shield, has an 84% market share, and in Hawaii it has 65% market share. When it comes to high-speed internet access, almost all markets are local monopolies. Over 75% of households have no choice with only one provider. 4 players control the entire U.S. beef market and have carved up the country. After 2 mergers this year, 3 companies will control 70% of the world's pesticide market and 80% of the U.S. corn seed market. The list of industries with dominant players is endless. It gets even worse when you look at the world of technology. Laws are outdated to deal with the extreme winner-takes-all dynamics online. Google completely dominates internet searches with an almost 90% market share. Facebook has an almost 80% share of social networks. Both have a duopoly in advertising with no credible competition or regulation. Amazon is crushing retailers and faces conflicts of interest as both the dominant e-commerce seller and the leading online platform for third-party sellers. It can determine what products can and cannot sell on its platform, and it competes with any customer that encounters success. Apple's iPhone and Google's Android completely control the mobile app market in a duopoly, and they determine whether businesses can reach their customers and on what terms. Existing laws were not even written with digital platforms in mind. So far, these platforms appear to be benign dictators, but they are dictators nonetheless. It was not always like this. Without almost any public debate, industries have now become much more concentrated than they were 30 and even 40 years ago. As economist Gustavo Grullón has noted, the nature of U.S. product markets has undergone a structural shift that has weakened competition. The federal government has done little to prevent this concentration and, in fact, has done much to encourage it. It is difficult to overstate the stakes for the economy and politics from industrial concentration. One of the great mysteries of the past few years is why economic growth has been so poor and why so many men and women with broken hopes have simply given up and dropped out of the workforce. To give a sense of the crisis, in 2016, 83% of men in their prime working ages that were not in the labor force had not worked in the previous year. That means 10 million men are missing from the workforce. These are not purely statistics. They are our fellow sons, brothers, and fathers. Economic growth has been poor despite the trillions of dollars of liquidity the Federal Reserve has pumped into the economy, and despite trillions of dollars of government debt. After the global financial crisis, the United States has experienced high levels of long-term unemployment, stagnant wages, dismal numbers of new startups, and low productivity growth. These problems, though, have deeper roots. After the dot-com bust, the economy rebounded, but growth was more anemic than during the 1980s or even 1990s. After the financial crisis, growth was even more pathetic. Each expansion has experienced lower growth than the previous one. There is not one variable that answers all questions, but a growing mountain of research shows that less competition has led to lower wages, fewer jobs, fewer startups, and less economic growth. Broken markets create broken politics. Economic and political power is becoming concentrated in the hands of distant monopolists. The stronger companies become, the greater their stranglehold on regulators and legislators becomes via the political process. This is not the essence of capitalism. Capitalism is a game where competitors play by rules that everyone agrees. The government is the referee, and just as you need a referee and a set of agreed rules for a good basketball game, you need rules to promote competition in the economy. Left to their own devices, firms will use any available means to crush their rivals. Today, the state, as referee, has not enforced rules that would increase competition, and through regulatory capture has created rules that limit competition. Workers have helped create vast wealth for corporations, yet wages barely kept up with the growth in productivity and profits. The reason for the large gap is clear. Economic power has shifted into the hands of companies. Income and wealth inequality have increased as companies have captured more and more of the economic pie. Most workers own no shares and have barely benefited from record corporate profits. As G.K. Chesterton observed, too much capitalism does not mean too many capitalists, but too few capitalists. When the left and right speak of capitalism today, they are telling stories about an imaginary state. The unbridled, competitive free markets that the right cherishes don't exist today. They are a myth. The left attacks the grotesque capitalism we see today as if that were the true manifestation of the essence of capitalism, rather than the distorted version it has become. Economists like Thomas Piketty even see within capitalism itself a logical contradiction that devours the future, rather than locating the problem in a lack of competition. But what we see today is the result of the urge to monopolize, where big companies eat up the small, and government is captured to rig the rules of the game for the strong at the expense of the weak. While many books have been written on capitalism and inequality, the left and the right don't even read the same books. Researchers have analyzed book purchases, and there are almost no political or economic books that both sides pick up and read. Likewise, if you look at Twitter debates, the data shows that the left and the right don't even share ideas with each other or debate. Neither side speaks to the other, much less listens. Supporting capitalism has been identified with being pro-big business rather than being pro-free markets. This book is unabashedly pro-competition. Big business is not bad, but too often size has come through mergers that have destroyed competition and subverted capitalism. We hope this book will bridge the divide and find a common ground between the left and right. Both sides may prefer different tax rates or have different views on social policy, but left and right should agree that competition is better for creating better jobs, higher pay, greater innovation, lower prices, and greater choice. A book that merely analyzes the problems without offering solutions is not particularly useful. In this book, we'll present solutions. We end the book with thoughts on how to reform and fix the economy and political system. We do hope you're outraged after listening to this book. But more important, we hope that you come away knowing that consumer and voter anger can be harnessed for good. In 1776, Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations, and the Continental Congress declared independence from Britain. Smith complained bitterly about monopolies. He wrote of the East India Company. The monopoly which our manufacturers have obtained has so much increased the number of some particular tribes of them that, like an overgrown standing army, they have become formidable to the government, and, upon many occasions, intimidate the legislature. That same year, among the reasons the American Continental Congress cited for separating from Britain in the Declaration of Independence was for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent. The Boston Tea Party was in response to the East India Company's monopoly on tea. The Wealth of Nations and the Declaration of Independence were bold statements against the abuses of monopoly power. Americans wanted entrepreneurial freedom to build businesses in a free market. Today, we need a new revolution to cast off monopolies and restore free trade. Chapter 1. Where Buffett and Silicon Valley billionaires agree. There's class warfare, all right, but it's my class, the rich class, that's making war, and we're winning. Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett is an icon for Americans and capitalists everywhere. For decades, his annual letters have taught and educated Americans about the virtues of investing. In many ways, Buffett has become the embodiment of American capitalism. He's called the annual meetings of his investment firm, Berkshire Hathaway, a celebration of capitalism, and has referred to his hometown of Omaha as the cradle of capitalism. Yet Buffett is the antithesis of capitalism. He has become a folk hero because of his simplicity. Even as he became America's second wealthiest man, he has lived in the same home and avoided a lavish lifestyle. He makes billions not because of dirty greed, but because he loves working. Books about him, such as Tap Dancing to Work, capture his jaunty ebullience. As a person, he is remarkably consistent. His daily eating includes chocolate chip ice cream at breakfast, 5 Coca-Colas throughout the day, and lots of potato chips. His investing is as consistent as his eating. For decades, he has recommended buying businesses with strong moats and little competition. The results have shown how right he is. Warren Buffett gained control of Berkshire for around $32 per share when it was a fading textile company, and turned it into a conglomerate that owns businesses with little competition. The stock is now worth about $300,000 per share, making the entire company worth more than $495 billion. For decades, Americans have learned from Buffett that competition is bad, and to avoid companies that require any investment or capital expenditures. American managers have absorbed his principles. Buffett loves monopolies and hates competition. Buffett has said at his investment meetings that the nature of capitalism is that if you've got a good business, someone is always wanting to take it away from you and improve on it. And in his annual reports, he has approvingly quoted Peter Lynch, "Competition may prove hazardous to human wealth." And how true that is. What is good for the monopolist is not good for capitalism. Buffett and his business partner, Charlie Munger, always tried to buy companies that have monopoly-like status. Once, when asked at an annual meeting what his ideal business was, he argued it was one that had high pricing power, a monopoly. The message is clear. If you're investing in a business with competition, you're doing it wrong. Unsurprisingly, his initial business purchases were newspapers in towns with no competition. According to Sandy Gottesman, a friend of Buffett, Warren likens owning a monopoly or market-dominant newspaper to owning an unregulated toll bridge. You have relative freedom to increase rates when and as much as you want. Back in the days before the Internet, people got their news from their local paper. Buffett understood that even a fool could make money with a monopoly. If you've got a good enough business, if you have a monopoly newspaper, your idiot nephew could run it. With that line of reasoning, in 1977, Buffett purchased the Buffalo Evening News. He bought this newspaper and then launched a Sunday edition to drive his competitor, the Buffalo Courier-Express, out of business. By 1986, the renamed Buffalo News was a local monopoly. In many ways, Warren Buffett is like Steph Curry of the Golden State Warriors. Curry is the master of the three-point shot. But if you look more closely at his record, you'll see that he mainly shoots uncontested three-point shots. He'll regularly stand several feet behind the three-point line. At first, defenders didn't even defend. Who would shoot from that far away? At one point in 2016, he made 35 out of 52 shots from between 28 and 50 feet. Scoring is a lot easier without competition. Over the years, Buffett followed his philosophy of buying into industries with little competition. If he can't buy a monopoly, he'll buy a duopoly. And if he can't buy a duopoly, he'll settle for an oligopoly. His record speaks for itself. Buffett was one of the biggest shareholders in Moody's Corporation, a ratings agency that shares an effective duopoly with Standard & Poor's. You might remember they rated the toxic subprime junk bonds that blew up the economy as AAA gold. He and his lieutenants bought shares in DaVita, which has a price-gouging duopoly in the kidney dialysis business. They have paid hundreds of millions to resolve allegations of illegal kickbacks. He's owned shares in Visa and MasterCard, which are a duopoly in credit card payments. He also owns Wells Fargo and Bank of America, which dominate banking in many states. Wells Fargo recently created millions of fraudulent savings and checking accounts in order to charge more fees to depositors. In 2010, he fully acquired railroad Burlington Northern Santa Fe, which is a local monopoly at this stage. He has owned Republic Services Group, a company that bought its largest competitor to have a duopoly in waste management. He has owned UPS, which has a duopoly with FedEx in domestic shipping. He bought all 4 major airline stocks after they merged and turned into an oligopoly. Lately, he's been buying utility companies that are local monopolies. We could go on listing Buffett's investments, but you're probably noticing a pattern here. He really doesn't like competition. By all accounts, he's a fine human being, but he's a monopolist at heart. Buffett has found his soulmates with 3G Capital Partners, a Brazilian investment firm that controls 50% of the U.S. beer market. The U.S. beer sector has now become a duopoly. Now they're trying to dominate the packaged food sector. In 2013, Buffett partnered with 3G to buy the H.J. Heinz Company, which 2 years later he merged with Kraft Foods to become Kraft Heinz. This gave them complete dominance in many areas of the supermarket shelf, like ketchup. They tried to buy Unilever in 2017, which would have given them even more ownership of dominant brands, but Unilever turned them down. Alas, Kraft Heinz Unilever was not meant to be. If Warren Buffett is the embodiment of American capitalism, then billionaire Peter Thiel is Silicon Valley's godfather. They could not be more different. Where Buffett is folksy and simple, Thiel is distant and philosophical. Buffett quotes the actress Mae West, while Thiel quotes French intellectuals like Jean-Jacques Van Schreiber. Buffett is a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat, and Thiel is a libertarian who has procured a New Zealand passport so he can flee when the peasants with pitchforks come for Silicon Valley monopolies. Buffett and Thiel have nothing in common, but they can both agree on one thing: competition is for losers. Thiel founded PayPal and has funded a legendary roster of businesses like LinkedIn and Facebook, which now has a monopoly on the key social networks and has a duopoly with Google on online advertising. He dislikes competition and redefines capitalism by turning it on its head. Americans mythologize competition and credit it with saving us from socialist breadlines. Actually, capitalism and competition are opposites. In Thiel's view, without fat profits, you can't fund innovation and improve. Thiel supported the Trump campaign, presumably because if you're running a monopoly, it is good to know your potential regulator. He wrote an entire book titled 0 to 1, praising creating businesses that are monopolies and defiantly declared that competition is a relic of history. Competition.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?